Hello, welcome back to the channel. My name's Jono. Happy New Year to you. Happy 2022. Let's hope that it's a much better year than 2021 was for most of us. Fingers crossed. Got another vintage film camera for you this time. Probably the most, certainly the most expensive camera that I've shown you so far. Maybe the most expensive one I'll ever show you. But this is the Canon AE-1 Program. So let's waste no time, jump straight in and have a look. So here we are then. This is the Canon AE-1 Program, first introduced in 1981, and it succeeded the AE-1, which had come out initially 5 years before that. As the name suggests, it introduced a program auto exposure mode, whereby the camera would set both the shutter speed and the aperture automatically, assuming you had the right type of lens fitted. However, you could turn that off and just have shutter priority mode, or indeed you could go to full manual mode. So basically this will go from a point and shoot, although albeit an SLR version, point and shoot, or a truly manual camera. And it's one of the reasons I think that made this this particular model a very, very popular model. And unfortunately, the second-hand prices do reflect that, which is why, as I say, it's more expensive than most of the cameras that I've shown you up until now. Just to give you an idea, mine isn't in perfect condition. It's in pretty good condition, but it's certainly not mint by any stretch. And I paid just over £100 for mine. A really mint one I've seen for a couple of £100. So not extortionate. Obviously you'd pay for a lot more for a modern digital camera, and indeed you could pay a lot more for some film cameras, but certainly more than the £20–30 mark that I've been sort of illustrating for you up until now. As you can see, mine is a combination of sort of silver chrome and black. They did come in an all black version as well. And there was occasionally an Olympic branded version, which basically had an Olympic logo on the lens cap, and I think a logo on the back here as well. But that doesn't make it anything special, to be honest with you. The camera is identical in all the other respects. So if we look at some of the controls, spin it around to the back first of all. We have our take back spool with the crank handle that flips out, as I'm sure you've seen many times before, and indeed lifting that will also pop the back open, which I'll show you in a moment to load film. We've got our ASA setting here with a button to unlock it. It locks initially to prevent accidentally changing it. So we press and hold the button down, and then we can slide this, and ASA can be set from 3200, which is obviously nice and fast, right down to 12 ASA, which obviously is quite slow. So a nice good range of films that this camera will accept, and obviously that the auto exposure will work in accordance with that. I'm just going to set that back to 400, which is kind of my standard. Otherwise I'm going to mess that up when I do put some film in later on. We've also got a battery check button here on top, which basically, if we press and hold that, hopefully you should hear some bleeps, which indicates that the battery is inserted and is in good condition. We've then got hot shoe for a flash, which is pretty standard, and we've got our viewfinder here. I'll show you inside the viewfinder a bit later on, because obviously we've got LED lights, etc. for our exposure settings. We've then got our shutter speed selector knob. It's on program at the moment, which, as I say, means that the camera's computer will automatically try and set shutter speed based on light conditions. But we can adjust that from anything from 1/1000th of a second right down, or right up, if you like, to 2 seconds. And indeed, there's a bulb mode there as well. Our exposure frame count is here. It's on S for start at the moment because there's no film loaded, but obviously that advances every time we take a shot. Our shutter release button with the little hole there to add a cable release if we require it. And we've got our crank lever for film advance. On the end then is a 3-way selector switch. Just hold that steady for you. It's set to A at the moment, which is not a standard setting. If we want to lock the shutter button so it can't fire, then we can set that to L, and then even if the film is advanced, it won't fire. But obviously if I set it to A, I can shoot. The last setting then, S, is for self timer. So if the camera's wound on and we press the shutter button, we get a 10-second self timer, and that bleep will get faster with 2 seconds to go, and then it will shoot. So that's the self timer. If you do activate the self timer but then change your mind, say you suddenly decide you're not ready, we can just switch this up to L to lock it, and it will reset itself. It will no longer be on self timer. On the back here, then we've also got a little slot whereby if we've forgotten the type of film we put in, we can tear off from the carton the details of the speed, etc., and slot that in there. I must admit I never use that. I always keep a spreadsheet of what film is currently loading what cameras. With the amount of cameras I've got, I can't rely on this being correct really, so it's just easier to have a separate spreadsheet, as long as I remember to keep it updated, obviously. On the bottom, then we've got some more bits and pieces. We've got a mount for our tripod. We've got the release button so we can actually wind the film back into the canister once we're done. This here isn't actually the battery, although that's what a lot of people assume it is, but it looks like a battery compartment. But basically there's an optional extra of a power wind-on motor which fits onto the bottom of the camera, and you would take this off first in order for that to engage there. And there's some electrical contacts here to actually power that as well. The battery is around here on the front of the camera. As I said to you, my version is in perfect condition, and I'm missing what's known as a sort of action grip that covered this up. I'll show you a picture when I'm editing the video. That would go over the top. So normally what you would have to do is you would have to unscrew that and take it off to get to this part. Unfortunately, I've tried looking for a replacement action grip, but for some reason they are ridiculously expensive for what effectively is just a bit of plastic. So far I've gone without. But yeah, to get to the battery, it's easier if I just use a pen here. I think we would open this little door here. As you can see, battery goes inside. The battery is quite easily, it's a 6-volt battery, and it's quite easy to source these on the internet. Amazon, etc. Sell them quite freely. Just close that over and lock it again, and like I say, then you would put the action grip back on top. But like I say, unfortunately I'll have to go without because I'm poor. Over this side then we've got a little PC port for our flash for the synchronization. It's just covered up at the moment. This little cap would come off, and the PC port is underneath then. Got some more switches here, but I'm going to come back to those in a moment because it'll be more relevant once I get to that bit. The lens that I've got on here at the moment is quite a cheap Iterex lens, f2.8, and it's a 28mm lens. But like any SLR, this can be changed. This camera uses Canon's FD mount, so it's a bayonet mount. That makes life very simple, but FD lenses unfortunately do tend to be a little bit pricey as well. I've got a couple of others with this mount, but this 28mm lens is the one that I use the most. If I just spin this round and show you the controls here, just like any other SLR lens, really, we've got our aperture ring here. If we're on manual aperture mode, we've got our focus ring here. However, this one, as I said to you, as long as we're set to program on the shutter speed selector, what we can also do is then press and hold this button here and move that across. We've got a little on my lens, a little green circle. Sometimes it's an A to say automatic. So now in program mode, we're not only setting the shutter speed automatically by the camera, but the camera will also set the aperture as well. But like I say, if you can override that to just shutter speed program automatically only, or obviously we can then change this to whatever shutter speed we desire as well. So going from, as I said to you, fully automatic to fully manual, or a couple of settings in between. Just a couple more controls then. We've got two buttons here. The upper one is the exposure lock. So basically what this means is that you compose your shot. So you've got your dial set to program mode, and you know, maybe you're choosing your aperture, or maybe it's on automatic aperture or whatever, but you're pointing the camera at the subject that you want to take the picture of. If we half press this, what will happen is it'll show us the exposure settings inside the camera in the viewfinder, and we can press and hold them. They'll actually be locked, so you could then point the camera at something else and it will keep the settings from the last shot onto this new one. A few instances where this can be useful, for instance, lighting. If lighting's not perfect for you, perhaps your subject is a bit backlit and it's making the face very dark because of it, because the camera is going to take exposure from the bright sunlight from behind the subject rather than from the subject itself. So if you point the camera directly at the person's face, for instance, or the subject's face, press and hold the exposure lock, and then come back and actually compose the shot as you want it, it will keep the settings for the face rather than from the backlighting behind. So that's one example. The lower of the two buttons is just a preview of the exposure settings. So the same effect you get by half pressing the shutter allows you to see what the suggested settings for the exposure should be, providing you're on program mode, obviously. Otherwise you are overriding those by choosing your own shutter speed and indeed your own aperture as well. But it'll still give you a preview of what the camera thinks is the best setting should be. This lower control then, I've not shown you this on any other cameras I've got. This is, well, it's known as the stop down lever, and what it basically does is it previews what the depth of field will be like. So quick sort of synopsis of what an SLR does. You're looking through the viewfinder, and by way of a mirror, you're looking out of the lens. But it's not actually applying the aperture or anything like that until you press the shutter button, in which point the mirror moves out of the way, the film is exposed because the shutter opens, and then the mirror drops down again. It's too quick for you to see what the actual shutter what effect it's having on depth of field, etc. But with this camera you can actually preview it. What you do is you lift this up and then push it across until it clicks. That's now applied the shutter, so I don't know if it'll pick it up on here, but you hopefully can see that the aperture has now been deployed. If I flick this off, and you can see that the aperture has gone back to fully open again. So fully open means you can obviously see your composition nice and clearly, but it's not what will actually be seen when you take the picture. So this is a bit of a way of actually previewing that, providing obviously you're not set to automatic exposure, in which case automatic aperture, in which case obviously you can't preview it. Okay, so let's put some film in it and just show you how this works. So just open the back up. I've shown you how to load 35mm film before, and what I'll do is I'll put a video in the top right hand corner, or a link to a video rather, in the top right hand corner to show you in more detail. I'm going to start filming some more videos, actually not reviewing films as such, but showing you different types of films, what's sort of peculiar about them, and show you basically me taking some photographs and what the results I get for, so you can see for yourself the different brands, the different speeds, etc., what they do. So this is actually Cinestill 800T, which is I'm going to show you the results of in a future video coming very soon, whereby I actually took some photographs at a local Christmas fair. So there we go, that's the Canon AE-1 Program. As I said to you, perhaps a little bit more expensive than some of the ones that I've shown you recently, But this is a fantastic camera, and that's probably why it holds its value so well. I use this one pretty much every time I go out. It's possibly my favorite 35mm SLR anyway from my collection, and I certainly use it more than any other camera in my collection. It's solidly built, it looks pretty, I think. It's just, you know, an all-round cracking camera. So if you've got a bit of extra money, well worth the investment, even if you're starting out, because you can set everything on to automatic and not have to worry. But as you progress, gradually take off settings until you're on fully manual, and welcome to the club. So there you go. Thank you very much for watching. You may have noticed a Patreon that I now have popping up during the video. If you wish, you can perhaps spare a couple of pounds just to buy me a cup of coffee. I'll make sure that I give you credit at the end of each of my videos. So just a thought for you. Other than that, I really hope that you've had a good Christmas and New Year, and that 2022, like I say, is going to be a much better year for you. I have got lots more videos planned for this year, and hopefully branching out into some new areas as well. Don't worry, staying with film photography and vintage cameras as well, of course. Until then, thanks once again. See you next time.